Your appraiser says it is worth $400. You have been carrying it around this room all night like it might go off.
Because my father kept it on his desk for 30 years. And every expert in this room just told me he loved a fake.
She turned, and the whole room turned with her. The way a room turns when the richest person in it decides to be cruel. She held it up. The chandelier light went through it and came out the other side the color of a coal.
So, tell me what's wrong with it, and it's yours. Right now, in front of all of them.
Tell me what's wrong with it, and you can walk out that door with it.
Somebody laughed, the soft laugh rich people use to applaud their own kind. She did not laugh, and that was the first thing I noticed about her, before I noticed anything else. She was not daring the room because she felt above it. She was daring it because she had been lied to, and did not yet know by whom, and this was the only way she had left to make someone in an expensive jacket flinch. I was there to pack the glass, not to talk. I had a roll of tape in one hand and a packing list in the other, and in my shirt pocket, a marble of green glass my son had given me that morning, because he said it held the best light.
I can tell you.
60 people turned to look at the man in the work coat who cuts windshields for a living. So did she. She crossed the room and set it in my hand, because she wanted the fall to happen up close, and I waited in my palm. For 9 seconds I did not say a word, because it was too heavy. The reproduction they said it was would have sat in my hand like an empty cup. This sat like a stone. This sat like the truth. And I knew that weight because I had held its twin a lifetime ago in a cold studio that is gone now, standing next to the man who taught me everything I know, who has been dead 11 years, and whose breath, along with a little of my own, was sealed inside the glass this woman had just called a fake. She wanted to watch a workman embarrass himself. She had no idea she had just handed the one thing her father left her to the only man alive who could prove what it truly was, and no idea that somewhere in that bright room stood the person who had made sure she never would. To understand what stopped me for those 9 seconds, you have to know what my hands already knew before my eyes had finished arguing. And you have to know whose hands had been inside that glass before mine. My name is Amos Whitfield. I am 41 years old. I own a two-man glass shop on the east side of Toledo, Ohio, where I replace windshields and cut mirrors for people who need them cut true. I am a widower. I have a son named Jonah who is 8, and that night in a work coat with a tape gun in my hand, I was exactly what a woman like Vivian Holt assumed I was, right up until she put her father's glass in my palm. Here is who I used to be. For a while, I was one of the few people in this country who could build studio glass at the highest level, solid crystal, blown and worked hot on the end of a pipe, the kind of thing that ends up under a light in a museum. I learned it from Conrad Voss, who was to American glass what a handful of dead names are to any art that outlives the hands that made it. He taught me one thing before he taught me anything else. Do not trust your eyes. Glass is built to fool the eye. It bends light, it flatters, it shows you a fire that is not there. Weigh it, he would say. Put it in your hand in the dark if you have to. The hand knows what the eye argues with. He kept one thing on his bench, a block of cherry wood the size of a fist, hollowed and burned smooth on one face from decades of shaping molten glass against it. There were 4 words cut into the underside, in his own hand. When he died, his widow let me keep it. It sits by my grinder now. I will tell you what the 4 words say when we get there, and not before. That is all I said out loud about any of it. That night I was still just the man they hired to pack the collection. The job had come through the auction company. The Holt estate was going to sale, and somebody needed to crate 300 pieces of fragile glass without breaking them. My shop is careful and my rate is honest. That is the whole reason I was in the room. I had Jonah's marble in my pocket the way I always do. He lines our kitchen windowsill with chips of colored glass I bring home, and every morning he holds one up to the light and tells me what he sees. That ritual is not mine. It was his mother's. Naomi started it, the 2 of them down at the lake picking sea glass out of the sand. And when she died 3 years ago, it was the one thing of hers he would not let go of. So I do not let go of it either. Then Vivian Holt held up a ball of solid crystal and dared the room to tell her why her dead father was a fool. Up close, it was the size of a good apple and heavier than it had any right to be. Cold in the hand, the way real crystal is cold, dense as a river stone. And through the center of it, when I turned it under the chandelier, ran a single thread of red. Not the flat orange of cheap glass. A deep coal red that leaned to gold at its edges, thin as a filament, twisting once and disappearing into a bubble no bigger than a seed. There is only one way to make that red, real gold dissolved into the batch. It is expensive and difficult, and almost nobody alive still does it by hand. Conrad Voss did. It was his signature, a single gold thread, buried at the heart of every serious piece, so the value lived inside the glass where a man across a room would never think to look. I knew to look. I had pulled that thread myself in a hot shop that smelled of scorched wood and his terrible coffee. I found the date next, hidden the way he hid it, a hair-thin cane of colored glass laid into the base, readable only if you knew the angle. It said 2009. I stood very still, because I was in that shop in the fall of 2009. Conrad made only a few of these solid pieces a year. He called them his lanterns, and he let no one near the bench for them who had not earned the right to stand there. I had earned it. I had been there when this one was born. "Well?" Vivian said. Her voice had an edge she was proud of, but her eyes were not proud. They were doing the thing eyes do when a person has decided to expect nothing, so the disappointment cannot land. "You have had it longer than the experts bothered to. What is wrong with it?" "Nothing is wrong with the glass," I said. "This is real. This is a Conrad Voss lantern made in the fall of 2009, and with the right paper it brings north of $1 million at auction." The laughter had already started when a man stepped out of the crowd and stopped it with one raised hand. He was maybe 55, silver at the temples, in a jacket that fit the way it fits a man who is never worried about money. He had the ease of a person who has been the most trusted man in a rich family's rooms for a long time. "That is a remarkable thing to say," he said warmly, "for a man hired to tape boxes. I have had this piece examined by 3 separate authorities. It is a decorative reproduction. A pretty one. I would hate for a moment of theater to give Miss Holt false hope on a night that is already hard for her." "His name is Preston Ainsley," Vivian said. "He advised my father for 20 years. He is handling the estate." Ainsley put out his hand. I shook it. His grip was warm and firm and lasted a half-second too long and told me nothing, which is its own kind of answer. A man whose handshake gives you nothing has practiced giving you nothing. "3 specialists disagree with you," he said, "and they had instruments. You have a tape gun." "They read the surface," I said. "This piece is telling the truth from the inside." "And what would he be looking at, in your view?" I should have stopped there. I did not. "The base," I said. "May I?" Vivian looked at Ainsley, and then deliberately, she looked away from him and back at me and nodded. I took a light from my coat and put the beam low across the bottom of the ball, raking, the way you light a surface to read what a straight light hides. The base had been ground and repolished. Recently. The fresh polish sat flat, and even where 200 years of wear should have been soft and uneven. Somebody had taken a wheel to the bottom of it. There is only one thing on the base of a Voss lantern worth removing. His maker's mark. The gold thread and the date told me what the piece was. The mark on the base was the thing a court would understand, and it was gone, ground away under fresh polish by a hand that knew exactly what it was erasing. The glass was not broken. It had been gagged. I looked up. And here's the part I did not understand until later. I said the thing that told the whole room I could see it. And I did it standing 8 feet from the one man who could least afford to be seen. "When did your father buy this?" I asked Vivian. "About 10 years ago, already made through a dealer." Something had come into her face that was more dangerous to her than anger, which was hope. "Why does that matter?" "Because someone has been inside this piece in the last year or 2, and they removed the one thing that proves what it is, on purpose. You do not accidentally polish the signature off a masterpiece." The room went very quiet. I want to be careful here, because this is where I made my mistake, and I have thought a great deal about why I did not walk it back. "I cannot prove the rest of it standing in a party with a flashlight," I said. "I need real light and my instruments. Let me photograph it here, tonight, in front of you, and take it to my shop to document it properly, and I will have it back on this table in the morning. But I want it written down that I took it, and what condition it was in, so nobody can ever say I did anything to it. Ask your handler to log it. Ask these people to witness it." Vivian looked at me for a long moment. Then she said to the room, "You all heard him. He takes it tonight, he brings it back in the morning, and it is written down." She turned to a young woman near the wall with a clipboard. "Log it. Every word." Ainsley did not object. That was the tell I missed, and I've put together since exactly what he saw in that moment, because it was not carelessness. A careful man protecting a real masterpiece objects. He does not let a discredited stranger drive it into the night. Ainsley let it happen because a discredited stranger driving a masterpiece into the night was the single most useful picture he could have been handed, and I had painted it for him myself and asked the room to sign the bottom. He did not need to stop me. He needed me to keep going. I drove home with $1 million of another person's glass wrapped in my coat on the passenger seat. And I thought the hard part of the night was behind me. It hadn't even started. Jonah was asleep at Mrs. Okafor's across the hall when I got home. I carried him to his own bed, and he woke halfway and asked if I had fixed the fancy glass, and I said not yet, and he said okay, the way children say okay when they have already decided you will. I set the lantern on my kitchen table under the good lamp and sat with it a long time. Conrad Voss kept records the way some men pray. Every serious piece he logged by hand in bound books he called his batch books. A photograph, the colors, the date, and a wax rubbing of the mark he had just cut, pressed into the paper while the glass was warm, so the proof of the signature lived on paper as well as in glass. He signed the apprentice line too, on the pieces we helped him with. A maker who does not write down what he made, he said, is asking the world to take his word for it. And the world takes no one's word for anything. If I was right about the date, then somewhere there was a page in his handwriting with a photograph of this exact lantern, a wax rubbing of the mark that had just been polished off the bottom of it, and my own name next to his, dated 2009. A record of the truth made years before Vivian Holt owned this glass, years before Preston Ainsley ever put his warm hand on it, in a place none of them could reach. If it still existed. I called the one man alive who would know. Gideon Frost ran Conrad's shop for 30 years. He is 74 now, retired outside Toledo with a garden he complains about, and a phone he answers like you interrupted something important. Whitfield, you only call when you want something. The batch books. After Conrad died, where did they go? The line went quiet. When he spoke again, the annoyance was gone. Why are you asking me that, son? Because I had my hands on a lantern from the fall of 2009 tonight, and somebody ground the mark off the bottom of it. I heard him set something down. Greta gave the books to the museum, downstate, back in 2014, before he even passed. There is an intake date on them. A registrar signed for every one. They have been sitting in a climate room full of strangers who never met you, since before that woman's father ever bought the piece. A pause. Take care with this. Men who grind a mark off a masterpiece do not do it for small reasons. Whatever that glass is hiding is worth more than the glass. He hung up first. He always hangs up first. I sat there with the lantern glowing coal red under the lamp, and I understood the first shape of the thing, but not the size of it. Because a man does not erase a signature and buy false papers to save money on a repair. He does it to change what a thing is. Whoever turned $1 million Voss into a $400 copy on paper had done it to buy it cheap. And you only make a thing look worthless if you already know it is not. I did not sleep. I brought the lantern back the next day to document it in daylight and to say what I had found. And the young woman with the clipboard was waiting for me in the receiving room off the gallery. She said her name was Nora Bishop and that she handled and logged the collection and that she had been told to give me access and otherwise stay out of my way. She said it the way you say a thing you have been instructed to say. She had already been told something about me and none of it was good. She did not warm to me. She watched me set up my raking light and my scale with her arms folded, and when I started to talk her through the piece, she cut me off. They told me you lost your license years ago for calling real things fake, she said. So before I stand here and watch, tell me why I should believe you over 3 experts and Mr. Ainsley. You should not believe me, I said. You should believe the glass. Come here. I did not argue my history. I put her hand on the piece. I showed her the weight against the scale and the gold in the thread and the date in the base, and then I put her palm flat on the bottom and then on the shoulder where the old surface still was. Here it is old, I said. Here it is new. The bottom of this ball is younger than the top by 200 years. A person did that, recently, with a wheel. She was quiet a long time after that. She walked to the door to the main house and looked through it and came back and looked at the piece again, and I could see her weighing something that had nothing to do with glass, weighing a year of her own silence against a job she needed. I did not push her. Conrad taught me that too. You do not pull the truth out of a person, you make it safe to set down, and then you wait. I could lose my position for this, she finally said. Lo. It left once. In 16 months, this piece left the collection exactly one time. Mr. Ainsley took it himself on a Tuesday, said it was going out for appraisal. He told me not to log it, said it was routine, no movement record needed. Every other object in this house has a record 30 years deep. This one has a week-long hole in it, and it came back with a certificate calling it a copy. She looked at me. I have wanted to tell someone that for a year. Nobody asked me the right question, and I was too frightened to volunteer it. I wrote down what she said, word for word, and she initialed it. Her hand was not steady. I have kept that page in a drawer since, because it cost her more than it cost anyone else in this story, and she is the reason any of the rest of it held. I thought about Conrad blindfolding me. I thought about the hand knowing what the eye argues with, and standing in that gilded room, I understood the sentence had never really been only about glass. Preston Ainsley had a warm handshake and a good jacket and 20 years of trust, and every eye in that house said he was the safe one and I was the stranger. And the truth of him sat wrong under the polish if you knew to weigh him instead of look. I told Vivian the piece was real and worth close to $1 million, and that I could prove what it was, but not yet who had done it to it. I expected her to seize it. She did not. She stood at the edge of the room with her arms crossed and said she had heard a great deal of confident talk from men in the last 2 years, and that she was done taking any of it on faith, including mine. But she did one thing, and it was the thing that mattered, and it was hers. She went into her father's papers herself. Not the estate accounts Ainsley managed. Her father's own private file, the one an insurer keeps a copy of, the scheduled policy on his valuables, where each piece carries an agreed value set by an outside appraisal. And she found the lantern on it in her father's time, insured in 2016 for $900,000. She called me and read me the number in a flat voice. A man does not insure a decorative reproduction for $900,000. Gerald Holt had known exactly what he owned. And within a year of his death, his own estate had recorded the same piece as a $400 copy. "One question," Vivian said on the phone, and it was the first time I heard fear in her instead of anger. If he did this to the piece my father kept on his desk, the one he loved, the one anyone would notice missing, what did he do to the things my father never looked at? I did not have the number yet. Neither did she. But I knew the shape of it. The way you know a crack is longer than the part you can see. One faked masterpiece is a theft. A man who handles a whole collection and is willing to grind Conrad Voss off the bottom of the best piece in it does not stop at the best piece. "Tomorrow," I told her, "get someone who does this for a living into your father's books, because I think you're going to find out you have been robbed for years, and I think the man who did it is the same man who just spent a night convincing you I am the thief." I hung up and stood in my dark shop, and I understood that I had just made myself the one thing standing between Preston Ainsley and everything the Holt family had. I did not yet know what a man like that would do about that. I was about to. It came sideways, wearing a face of concern. Ainsley did not call me. He went to Vivian, and I have put the conversation together since. He told her he was worried, not angry, worried, that she had let a stranger with a history drive off into the night with the most valuable thing her father left her. That years ago there had been an unpleasant matter, a piece at auction, and this same Amos Whitfield had called it a fake and made a great deal of noise, and it had gone badly, and he had left the field under a cloud. A man who lost everything crying fraud once, Ainsley said gently, might be eager to cry it again to a grieving woman with money. Every word of it was shaped like the truth. I did lose the field. I did stand up once and say a piece was fake, and it was fake, and it did not matter, because the market did not want a nobody telling it what it did not want to hear. Ainsley's own circle had helped bury me. He knew that, and he was betting Vivian did not. And then his real move, and it wore the face of care. The lantern was compromised now, he said. A stranger's hands all over it, no telling what he had done to it overnight. The responsible thing, until this was cleared up, was to place it in the estate's secure storage under seal, for her protection. He had it crated and gone before the end of the week, into a facility he controlled, on a schedule that would see the whole collection dispersed within the month. I found out when I called the house. Nora answered, and there was a silence before she spoke that told me most of it. "Mr. Whitfield, Miss Holt has asked that any further contact go through Mr. Ainsley, and the piece has been placed in storage. I am not to give out the location." A pause, smaller. "I am sorry." She hung up before I could ask what she was sorry for. The glass was gone, behind a door I could not open, in the custody of the one man with every reason to make it vanish. The woman I was trying to help had been told, by the man she had trusted since she was a girl, that I was the danger in the room. And the oldest wound I had, the one true thing I ever said that cost me the most, had been handed to her as the reason not to believe the next one. That is the trap of being underestimated. It swings both ways. Nobody believed a workman could see what 3 specialists missed, and nobody checked when a polished man in a good jacket called that same workman a fraud. I sat in my shop that night with the lights off, and for the first time since I opened it, I was afraid. Not for myself, because I had pointed a grieving woman at a dangerous man and then handed him every tool he needed to cut me out. Then I remembered what Gideon said, and I understood that Ainsley had built his whole story on one belief, that the only proof of what belonged on that base lived in my head, and in a workman's memory a jury would call a grudge. He did not know about the book. He did not know that the mark he had ground off in the dark had been pressed into paper in wax in Conrad Voss's own hand in 2009 and had been sitting in a climate room downstate, logged and signed for by strangers since the year before Gerald Holt ever bought the piece, in the one place all his access and all his polish could not reach. I did not call Vivian to defend myself. A man defending himself sounds exactly like a man with something to defend, so I called a lawyer named Renata Ortiz, and I told her about the museum and the insurance schedule Vivian had pulled, and a young woman with a clipboard and a year-long hole in a log. "But none of it lands," Renata said, "unless she chooses to believe it. He has her ear and 20 years. In a fight like this, the evidence does not win. The person does. So we are not going to mail her a document. We are going to put you in a room and let her decide." She did not decide easily. I want that on the record, because Ainsley had been the closest thing she had to family since her father died, and you do not turn on family in an afternoon, even when the arithmetic turns first. It took Renata 2 days and a forensic accountant's preliminary read before Vivian would even set the room. When she finally did, she told Renata she was doing it to clear the air, and that if I could not answer plainly, she was going to believe the man who held her hand at the funeral. She was not on my side walking in. She was on the truth side, which is a colder and better thing, and it was not the same as being on mine. The room was hers, glass on 3 sides, and the lake going gray beyond it. She sat at the head of the table. Ainsley sat at her right hand, jacket open, a man among friends in a room he had sat in 100 times. I sat across from him with Renata beside me and a thin folder I did not open. "Preston tells me you were discredited years ago for calling a real piece a fake," Vivian said to me, and her voice was level and cold. "That you drove into the night with the most valuable thing my father left me. That I have only your word. So before this goes 1 inch further, tell me why all of it is wrong." I did not tell her why it was wrong. I opened the folder and slid 1 page across the glass table. A scan of Conrad Voss's batch book, the page for the fall of 2009. A photograph of the lantern, the wax rubbing of the mark, pressed while the glass was warm. And on the apprentice line, in ink gone brown, my name next to his. Ainsley let a small, patient laugh into the room. "A photocopy of a notebook. He could have made that last Tuesday, Vivian. This is exactly the sort of manufactured thing I warned you about." I slid the 2nd page. The museum's intake record. The date the books entered the collection, 2014. The registrar's signature. A reference number. "The notebook is not the evidence," I said. "The date is. That book has been in an institution downstate, in the hands of strangers, since 2014, 2 years before your father bought this piece. There is no Tuesday on which I could have written it." I slid the 3rd page. Nora Bishop's statement. The 1 week the lantern left the estate. Who took it? Who ordered it unlogged? "The book proves the mark existed," I said. "This proves the glass went missing exactly once, under one man's control, off the record, on his own instruction, and the base was ground and repolished, which is a thing a person does to a signature they do not want found." Vivian laid a 4th page beside my 3. She did it herself, without being asked, and I understood then that she had brought her own evidence to the table. Her father's insurance schedule. $900,000 in his own time on the piece the estate now called worthless. You could feel the weather of the room turn. Ainsley kept talking. Archives misfile things. The handler was disgruntled. But the air had gone out of the words, and he heard it. And he turned in his chair away from me, toward her, and dropped his voice to the register of an old friend. "Vivian, I carried your father's casket. You have known me since you were a child on this lawn. You met this man 4 days ago, packing your boxes. He let it sit. I am asking you, as the one person who has never steered you wrong, who are you going to believe?" She did not answer him right away. She looked down at the 4 pages fanned across the glass, at the wax rubbing, at the dead man's handwriting, at the museum date, at her handler's shaking initials, at her father's own number in her father's own file. She took her time. Ainsley made the mistake of letting her because he thought the silence was working for him. Then she lifted her eyes, and she did not look at me. She looked at him. "You keep telling me I met this man 4 days ago," she said, "as though it makes him a stranger and you a fixture. So I have 3 questions, Preston, and you will answer them in this room." She put her hand flat on the pages. "Explain how his name came to be in a museum's archive in 2014, next to a rubbing of a mark you say never existed. Explain why my own handler was told not to log the 1 week this glass left my father's house, and it left in your care. and explain who ground the mark off the bottom of it and why the appraiser you hired to call it a copy was paid through a company with your name folded 3 layers down inside it. Ainsley opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He looked at the pages, and for once in his long, warm, careful life, he had nothing to say. His hand went to the arm of the chair, and for a second, in the gray light off the lake, I watched a man who had never once been at a loss in a room look for a door in a wall of glass and find none. "You are not going to answer," Vivian said. It was not a question. "I do not need to dignify a theory," he said, but it came out thin. 4 days, she said. "What?" You keep saying 4 days as though it shames him. But 4 days is how long it took a stranger with a tape gun to find what 20 years of trust somehow never did. She turned to Renata, not to him. "Get the collection out of that facility. Independent accountants, my choice, not his. And bring the lantern back to this house." She did not ask Preston Ainsley to arrange it. That was the turn. It was not the end. A man who feels the floor going does not wait for the fall. The accountants confirmed what the crack had promised. Insured high by the father, appraised low by the estate, bought back cheap through companies that led home to Preston Ainsley. Just over $12 million, patient and precise, running since a few months after Gerald Holt was cold in the ground. Vivian did not shout when they told her. She asked one question, and it was not how much, and it was not how, but since when. And when they told her, she stopped being a woman who had been robbed and became a woman who had been lied to by the last man her father trusted. Those are not the same wound. They told her she could recover it quietly. She said no. She wanted it referred out. And a man who feels the floor going comes looking for the last loose thread. He did not come to my shop. He was smarter than that. On a Thursday, a package arrived addressed to my son, not to me, to Jonah Whitfield in a careful hand, no return address, a courier paid in cash. Inside was a marble. One marble of blown glass, gold ruby red, expensive, the kind a man makes to show he can, and a card, unsigned, in the same careful hand. It said, "For the young man who likes to watch the colored light on the wall by the library steps after school. He has a good eye, from a friend." I read it in my own doorway, and the shop went very quiet, and out on the street a truck downshifted and was gone. The wall by the library steps is where Jonah waits for me on the days I run late. He sits under the tall window and watches the afternoon come through the old colored glass and land on the wall. Almost no one knows he likes that spot. You would have to have watched him to know it. You would have to have stood near a boy who was not yours and made a note of where he liked to sit and how the light fell. I set the marble on my bench next to Conrad's cherrywood block because I did not trust my hands to do it any other way. I have big hands and a long memory and one thing left in the world I cannot afford to lose, and I could feel every ounce of all three. I picked the block up without deciding to. I did not read the 4 words on the underside. I did not need to. And I understood the sentence had one more meaning in it I had never needed until now, which is that the hand knows what the eye argues with, and my eye wanted to call this a gift, a coincidence, a soft red toy, and my hand knew exactly what it was weighing. It was a message. It said in the gentlest possible words, "I know where your boy sits, and I can reach him, and there is no crime in a gift. Go quiet." Or, he never wrote the ORR. That was the whole art of it. For about an hour, it worked. I sat in my shop and thought about a courtroom and the word grudge, and I thought, I can tell Renata I misremember the dates now. I can be unavailable. Vivian has her accountants. She does not need me. Nothing is worth Jonah. Nothing. Then I went home, and Jonah was at the table with the windowsill glass laid out, holding a blue chip up to the last of the light, and he looked at me and knew, the way he always knows, and asked what was wrong. I did not have a lie ready, and even if I had, he would have read it off me in a second, because I have never once been able to hide anything from that boy. So I told him a small piece of the truth, that I had seen something at work a powerful man did not want seen, and that if I told about it, things might be hard for us for a while. He thought about it with his whole face. "Is it true?" he asked. "The thing you saw?" "Yes." "And you're the only one who can tell?" "For now. Maybe." He nodded, slow. Then he picked up the green marble off the sill, the twin of the one in my coat, and held it up to the light and turned it and said, "Then you have to. You always say to hold it up and check. You can't just leave it in the dark." 8 years old, handing me back the thing I gave him. I did not go quiet. I took the marble and the card and the courier receipt, and I called a detective named Ray Coulter and told him exactly what the card said. Exactly which wall, exactly which window, exactly which child. Because a man can call me a fraud in a glass room and I will wait him out. But the moment he told a boy who was not his where the light fell on a wall my son liked, Preston Ainsley stopped being a question of money and became something the law has a much shorter fuse for. Coulter took it seriously. It went into the file as intimidation of a witness, which raised Ainsley's exposure enormously. He pleaded that spring, wire fraud and tampering with a witness, restitution of just over $12 million, barred for life from the trade and the boards and the quiet rooms where he had done his work, which for a man like that is the sentence that actually lands. I would like to tell you the fear left when the cell door did. It did not. For the rest of that year, I walked Jonah to school myself and stood at the wall by the library at 3 every afternoon, whether I was late or not. And more than once, I caught myself reading the faces of men in parked cars, weighing them, the way you weigh a piece you do not trust. The green marble that came in the package I could not throw away and could not look at. I put it in a drawer in the back of the shop, and it is still there. Some weights do not leave your hand just because the danger is over. That is the part the neat version of a story never tells you. Vivian did not come to thank me for a long time, and when she did, it was not smooth, and I am glad it was not. She came to the shop on a gray afternoon in early spring with a flat wooden case under her arm. Jonah was at school. It had started to rain, and she stood just inside the door, not shaking the rain off, not sitting, looking around at the windshields and the mirror stock like a person who does not know how to be in a place like this and has decided not to pretend she does. "I rehearsed something to say to you," she said, "in the car. It sounded like a speech, so I am not going to give it." She set the case on the counter and did not open it. "I believed him over you until I could not. You should know that. I did not have some noble moment of faith. I ran out of ways to keep believing the comfortable thing, and that is not the same as trusting you, and I am not going to dress it up as if it were." "I never asked you to trust me," I said. "I asked you to trust the glass. That is different, and it is better, and it is the only thing I ever had to offer you." She was quiet a moment. Then she opened the case. I knew before I saw it. The shape under the cloth was a shape my hands remembered. It was Conrad's 2009 batch book, the original. Not the scan that turned the room, but the actual book, the cloth gone soft at the corners from a careful man's hands. Gideon had arranged it with Conrad's widow. I opened it to the page for the lantern. My name was on the apprentice line, careful and a little too neat, the writing of a young man who wanted an old man to be proud of him and did not know how to ask. And under my name, in Conrad's own hand, was a note I had never seen, because apprentices do not read the master's private notes. And by the time this book left his shop, I was gone. He had written that the boy had the hands, which you cannot teach, and the eye, though the eye lies to everyone and the boy did not yet know it, and that the only question left in him was patience, which is the last to arrive and the hardest. And that he had watched me long enough that fall to decide he would believe I got there in the end. "What does it say?" Vivian asked. She had not moved from the counter. "It says he thought I might turn out all right." She nodded like that was a better answer than the easy one. And then awkwardly, in a voice that clearly cost her, she said there was a museum program downstate that needed someone to build a working studio for people who could not pay for one, and that Gideon had given them my name, and that she was not going to pretend the offer was not partly her trying to put something right that she could not put right any other way, and that if I ever wanted to bring my son to a dinner where nobody was buying or selling anything, she would like that, and she would understand entirely if the answer was no, given what her trouble had put through my front door. "I will ask him," I said. "He runs my calendar." She did not smile the way people smile when a story is ending well. She nodded once, like a person setting down something heavy, and she went out into the rain, and I watched her car until it turned, and I did not know then, and do not know now, what that dinner will be. It was not a happy ending handed across a counter. It was two people who had been through the same bad month agreeing carefully to find out if there was anything on the other side of it. That is all. It was enough. That night, after Jonah was asleep, I did the thing I had been telling myself I would do when he was older. I decided he was old enough. I went and got the cherrywood block off the bench and I put it on the kitchen table, and in the morning I did not explain it. I just left it there next to his colored glass where he would find it. He came out in his socks and picked it up, the way he picks up anything he has not yet taken apart, and he felt the weight of it, and he ran his thumb over the burned, smooth face, and he turned it over. "There's writing," he said. "Read it to me." He read the 4 words slow, the way an 8-year-old reads, and I am going to tell you what they were now, because we are here, and because he is the one who read them out loud first, in a kitchen, in his socks, and that is the only way I ever wanted him to hear them. The hand knows the truth. What does it mean? He asked. I thought about the long version, the one Conrad taught me at the bench, about the eye and the light and everything glass is built to hide. That was the lesson. These 4 words were what he cut into the wood when the lesson was done. It means people will show you a fire that isn't there, I said, and a lot of them will believe it because it's easier than picking a thing up. So when it matters, don't just look. Hold it. Weigh it. Your hands are more honest than your eyes, and more honest than mine, and a good deal more honest than the loudest man in the room. He thought about that. He put the block down next to the green marble, lined up neat, the way he lines up his glass on the sill. Is it mine now? It's yours now. He nodded like that settled something, and went to find his backpack, and left the block and the marble sitting side by side in the morning light, the honest man's tool and the toy that a dishonest one sent, and I let them sit there together because I want him to grow up knowing that both of those things exist, and that his hands will always be able to tell them apart. So I am not going to ask you what you would have done. You were not in that room, and a question like that only flatters whoever answers it loudest. Here is the one I actually want answered, and I read every reply. Somewhere in your life there is a person the whole world only ever looks at and has never once picked up and felt the true weight of. You know the one. A parent, maybe. A quiet friend. Someone who folded themselves small so you would have room. Go and weigh them while they are still in reach. Then come back and tell me who it was.